shedding light on pension fund investments in Pennsylvania, gun ban challenges going to the U.S. Supreme Court, the Voters' Voice poll tackles sentiments about the future of democracy, fireworks taxes, the cost of the moon base, and so much more. Welcome to The States, powered by the Center Square. It's Wednesday, July 1st, 2026, and I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Today marks 20 years for me being in the news talk space. I first cracked open a microphone for News Talk Radio in Springfield, Illinois, Saturday, July 1st, 2006, 2 full decades ago. Now this journey continues to be a blessing. As my career continues to evolve and thrive, hearing how I've impacted others through simply sharing information, be it local news or complex conversations about controversial topics, it's very humbling. I've interviewed aldermen, state representatives, U.S. senators, and even the president. I've covered fires and tax increases, major court cases, and political conventions. There's so many names and personalities that I've worked with and interviewed over the years and experienced history many times sitting in the front row. But one person I need to thank is my late wife, Megan. She took a scrappy kid from high school with no direction and helped him find his way in this world. Megan was my biggest fan. I wouldn't be who I am if it wasn't for you. I miss you, sweetheart. Pennsylvania's public school employees pension fund, $41 billion short of what it needs to pay promised benefits. Now, last year, it missed the investment benchmark that officials set. The results, they said, was primarily due to the performance within private equity investments. Now, joining us to discuss his latest investigation is the Center Square investigative reporter, Mark Stricherz. Mark, talking about pensions can sometimes get into the weeds and people's eyes may gloss over, but why should taxpayers, not just in Pennsylvania, but really any state and local government with public sector employee pension funds, really understand the significance of pension fund investment returns?
Because the money that would go out of pension funds was going to come out of their pocket, going to affect their roads, schools, bridges, and public services generally. Somehow the state officials must find a way to make up for the shortfall, which in Pennsylvania is $41 billion. That's equivalent. It's only about 2/3 funded, which is at least 13 percentage points below 80% of what pension officials and scholars think that a state pension fund should be funded at. So Pennsylvania taxpayers are on the hook, as well as possible employee benefits, beneficiaries, and their members.
Yeah, the other post-employment benefits, that's almost an entirely different story than just the pension payments that are going to go out when a state employee retires. But let's take a look further at Pennsylvania. How big of a funding issue are we talking about here?
Well, as I mentioned, only 2/3 of the $85.3 billion pension is funded. $41 billion is, you might say, missing, that someone's going to have to pay for over the years. And the key reason is that private equity fell short last year. State officials basically sought a number of like 10% return, and they got only 2.5%. That's a significant difference.
And is it the case that I've seen in other jurisdictions, Mark, that when the investments are projected, we're going to have a great year, we're looking at possibly getting 10%, people making budgets work that 10% in, but when it comes back after that prediction, it's only 2%. How do they make up that 8%?
Well, as I mentioned, they're going to have to find various ways to do it, from raising taxes or finding new ones, paying for more for their roads, highways, bridges, schools, and the like, or it's going to have pension beneficiaries, their pensions, their contributions will have to be raised, or future benefits for beneficiaries will be cut. So it's going to come out of somewhere.
Again, looking at Pennsylvania, their retirement system, $85.3 billion in assets, $41 billion in a pension shortfall. And you're saying they have about 2/3 of their total amount of owed pensions covered by tax dollars. And there's about 500,000 members, beneficiaries, and survivors. Mark,
Right.
the money doesn't just sit there, as you were talking about, it's invested, right? It's investments
Yes.
going to try to bring in more return to help pad the coffers, but these investments don't always turn out. That rate of return falls short. But you particularly looked at one industry of investment, one tool of investment, and that is the private equity. What's happened recently with private equity investments?
Well, it's not just recently, actually. It's over 15 years that private equity, this asset class, has not delivered the results that state pension officials expected that it would produce. Private equity has failed to meet its benchmarks, not only just last year, but also 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and 15 years ago. And now the state of Pennsylvania does not have most of its money, of its $85 billion that it invests in private equity. It was only about $10 billion last year. And there are seven other asset classes, such as stocks, bonds, private credit, private real estate, that Pennsylvania, for school employees, I should make clear, has invested in. There's 8 asset classes. Private equity is one of them. It's one of the major ones. And it only produced a return of 2.5% all year last year, and that's a year when the stock market was up almost 12-13%. Perhaps some of our readers will know that if their investments in a stock will go up like 10% in one day, if they're lucky. They've invested in a company like NVIDIA, stock semiconductor maker and designer. So the fact that this private equity, the whole asset class, only produced 2.5%, that'd be like sometimes an afternoon for a company like NVIDIA. That puts it in perspective.
Now, PCers, as you're highlighting here, their investment in private equity has decreased just in the past couple of years. Looks like 16.3% of investments in 2024, about $12.2 billion, down to 11.8%, or about $10.1 billion of overall investments. Pennsylvania is not the only one seeming to pull back away from private equity as part of their pension investment plans. Tell us about some of these other states that are also following suit.
Right, a number of states: Alaska, Maine, Nevada, Virginia just did recently, a month or two ago, and another state, Montana, that have pulled back from private equity. Now, each of those states' pension funds does invest in private equity, but they not investing as much as they used to. And as our graphics said, there in Pennsylvania, it was $12.1 billion last fiscal year, but as of last December, in Pennsylvania's public school employees pension fund, it was $10.1 billion. So that's a decline in percentage terms from 16% basically to 12%. That's over like basically a year and a half period. To lose 4% in year and a half, that's a bad trend line if you're private equity. And I think more generally here, people should realize, appreciate, I couldn't put it in my story, but private equity has this reputation as being Wall Street's golden goose. Perhaps you have seen on YouTube, there's a man who impersonates a private equity. He's called Private Equity Guy, and he's seen as super rich. He's so out of touch because he's so filthy wealthy that he can't relate to ordinary people. But on the ground in these states that I mentioned, they're realizing that that's kind of old news, that private equity isn't producing the returns that it has. I mean, this is not to say that private equity is doing poorly, has done poorly over 30 years, because it has done well, or at least 11% annualized return since the state of Pennsylvania's
that's pretty healthy
system. Yeah, it has invested since almost 11% since 1998. But recently, private equity has done poorly, so much so that pension fund managers are having to ask the question: are the premium fees that they're paying private equity firms, are they worth tying up money in private equity and getting these low teens, single figure returns?
Yeah, and clearly, as you said, it's not just in Pennsylvania where they're starting to pull back a little bit from private equity, but 6 other states: Alaska, Maine, Washington, Ohio, Nevada, and Virginia. Mark, greatly appreciate you taking the time. We'll check back in again soon. We'll be right back with more from the states. The U.S. Supreme Court will hear cases challenging the constitutionality of states and local governments banning certain types of firearms that are commonly owned. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. Tuesday afternoon, the High Court agreed to hear arguments in Viramontes v. Cook County. That's in Illinois County and Illinois' gun ban. That's a case based where local ordinances have banned these firearms, but also Illinois has banned them statewide. Now, Cook County in Illinois banned assault weapons nearly 20 years ago, Illinois implementing its ban in 2023. Now, the Supreme Court also agreed to take up a case out of Connecticut dealing with firearms bans. The question there is whether the Second and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution guarantee the right to possess semi-automatic rifles that are in common use for lawful purposes, including the most popular rifle in the country, the AR-15. Now, after the orders were announced that justices will tackle that question many gun owners across the country are grappling with, I talked with the Second Amendment Foundation founder, Alan Gottlieb. Now let's talk with Alan Gottlieb. He is with the Second Amendment Foundation. And Alan, some big things happening with Second Amendment rights and challenges to a variety of different laws. We've seen, of course, the big rulings that have come down from the U.S. Supreme Court, all while people were waiting for months as to whether they're going to take up challenges to gun bans. What did they issue yesterday, or Tuesday rather, on their orders list concerning Illinois and Connecticut?
Well, the Supreme Court of the United States took 2 of the Second Amendment Foundation cases, 2 very important cases, challenging the assault weapon bans in Cook County, Illinois, and the state of Connecticut, and they consolidated them both to hear them in the next session. We're really excited about it. Quite honestly, it's long overdue. We've been waiting and waiting, and now that they've taken them, it's going to be great because a right delayed is a right denied.
A lot of these cases have been circulating for quite some time in the judiciary. What kind of indication have you seen from the court thus far, especially this term, with the case out of Hawaii, the case concerning nonviolent drug users? What does that tell you about the trajectory of the issue of whether or not a state can ban people carrying firearms, or not carrying firearms, but purchasing certain types of firearms, like semi-automatic rifles?
Yeah, I feel really good based on the signals we got from the Supreme Court this year. For the next session, I think we're going to be very happy with the results. There's no doubt in my mind, I believe that those bans are going to bite the dust. I don't think the Supreme Court would have taken this case if they weren't going to overturn the bans. It takes 4 justices out of the 9 to hear a case. It takes 5 to win it. And I really believe we've got more than the 5 to win it.
Something else that happened with the U.S. Supreme Court and these writs for requests to take these cases, there was one concerning adults between the age of 18 and 20 and whether or not they have the ability to purchase or carry certain types of firearms. What happened in this case?
Yeah, this is also a Second Amendment Foundation case out of Pennsylvania. We won it twice at the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. The state of Pennsylvania appealed it, and the Supreme Court denied their cert, meaning our victory decisions on the Third Circuit stand. This case basically in Pennsylvania, 18 to 20-year-olds were not allowed to carry firearms, and the courts basically ruled that they have rights as young adults. They're protected by the Second Amendment.
So what does that mean for other states that may have these types of laws in place?
Yeah, we have challenges against other states that have these laws in place as well. What this ruling probably means is that we're going to win every single case.
Alan, obviously, we've been waiting for a long time for some of these cases to get to where they are right now. How much more do you think people are going to have to wait, especially on the issue of whether or not states can ban certain types of firearms from possession?
Well, taking the case, granting a cert, they hear it in the next session, which starts next October. We probably won't get a decision in that until about next June. So it's about a year from now that's how long it's going to take.
Do you think that's going to hold off some of these other cases that are still being dealt with in the lower courts? I'm thinking of another one out of Illinois in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. They've been sitting on that case where a district judge said it was unconstitutional. They've had that case and heard it in September. Here we are now. It's July.
Yeah, I have a feeling everything's going to be on hold on the gun ban cases around the country until the Supreme Court issues their final opinion, probably around next June. So everything's probably just going to be just on hold.
Alan Gottlieb with the Second Amendment Foundation. Greatly appreciate you taking the time here with the states. Now, on the issue of the U.S. Supreme Court taking up the case, John Schmidt, GPAC Executive Board member, released this statement. He said the Supreme Court will decide an issue on which 6 federal courts have already agreed that the Second Amendment allows a ban on guns with enhanced lethal features designed for military assault. He further said, "We believe those decisions are rights under the Constitution and consistent with the long-standing American history of banning weapons from Bowie knives to machine guns that are exceptionally dangerous and not needed or used for self-defense." He said, while this case is before the Supreme Court, the Illinois law remains fully in effect, and the sale of these weapons remains unlawful in our state. Abby Clements, co-founder of Teachers Unified to End Gun Violence, released this statement after the Supreme Court took up those cases. She said, "The simple fact is that we've had fewer mass shootings, and mass shootings were less deadly when we had a federal assault weapons ban in place. With the Supreme Court opening the door to striking down more state bans, we know what the result will be: more mass shootings and more gun deaths." And while it's not expected the Supreme Court cases will be heard until later this year or early next year, a ruling on the case may not come out until about this time next year. Meanwhile, legal battles continue on this and other Second Amendment issues all throughout the states. Get the latest by subscribing here and with the newsletter at thecentersquare.com. We'll be back with more from the states.
If I didn't get elected, we wouldn't have a country. We really wouldn't have a country. This country would be finished.
It's President Donald Trump delivering a line that he's said time and again about the future of democracy if he wasn't elected for a second consecutive term. Welcome back to the States. About half of Americans are confident about the future of democracy in the United States, but 250 years in, nearly 2/3 say the country is not living up to its founding principles. It's according to recent polling. Welcome back. The Center Square Voters Voice Poll surveyed more than 2,500 registered voters, asking them how confident they were about democracy's future and how well America's founding principles were being practiced today. The Center Square reporter Morgan Sweeney joins us to discuss the poll's findings. Morgan, what was the response to the question that was provided here? Thinking about the years ahead, how confident are you in the future of democracy in the United States?
Mm-hmm. So like you said, about half of Americans answered that they were confident in the future of democracy here in the U.S. But I mean, close to half, but 47%, which isn't extremely high. And then the other 44% responded with that they weren't confident. And a few answered that they weren't sure.
And you can see they're kind of broken out, 47% confident, but even that, only 16% were very confident, 31% somewhat confident. But that other side of the spectrum there, 44% not being confident. Interesting to see that, about 15% said they had zero confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most fell in the middle there, either somewhat confident at 31% or not too confident at 29%. So it's pretty closely divided there.
What's great about the Voters' Voice poll that Noble Predictive Insights puts together for the Center Square is they have a large sample, 2,000 plus, right? And they also do some demographic work with some of this. Break out some of those various demographics on this particular question. What does it look like?
Mm-hmm. So what I thought was interesting about this particular poll is that I feel like when I'm looking at the results, to write on something, there's usually more stark differences within demographic groups like race or, education level or income level. But there were really only 3 demographic groups that stood out to me in this poll. And that was Trump and Harris supporters, people who voted for them in the last presidential election, Republicans and Democrats, and men and women. So far and away, the group that was most confident in the future of American democracy was Trump supporters at 63%, followed closely by Republicans. But that was much, much higher than, anything else, any other demographic group that responded to the poll. And then another group that stood out was men and women, because there was quite a difference there too, in how those two groups responded. So 56% of men responded that they were confident, while only 40% of women were confident.
We almost need a psychologist or something to explain that one to us, the disparity between men and women. But talk a little bit more about that disparity between Trump supporters and Harris supporters. We heard the president at the top there say, if he wasn't elected for a second non-consecutive term, then we wouldn't have a country, he says. Yes. It seems to be that the other side is worried that we're not going to have a country since their candidate didn't get elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we saw almost the opposite with Harris supporters. While 63% of Trump supporters answered that they were confident, 56% of Harris supporters indicated that they had very little confidence in the future of democracy. And that was followed by Democrats as a whole. 53% of them had very low confidence. So, yeah, it was interesting to see.
And then you also have the other question about, the founding principles and whether they were being well practiced today. Trump supporters saying 47%, finding that, yeah, indeed, that things are going well when it comes to the founding principles. That didn't seem to be the case with Harris voters concerning founding principles.
No, I believe it was 78% of Harris supporters said that they did not think that the country was living out its founding principles. So it's sad to see that.
And especially heading into a midterm where this type of polling data is going to be crucial as we get updates closer to November. But clearly an interesting story to tell here, and people can find more about these poll numbers at thecentersquare.com. Morgan Sweeney for the Center Square. Greatly appreciate you taking the time here for the States. We'll be right back. Saturday is Independence Day, and for some of you out there, nothing speaks louder in declaring your independence than going out, lighting a wick to a big cardboard cannon full of gunpowder and sparkles, and watching its incredible glory up in the heavens. It's also a sight to behold and a symbol of the nation's founding. But how much are you paying above and beyond for those ordinances? Let's first talk about where you can get them. Welcome back to the States. I'm your host, Greg Bishop, and happy Independence Day to you. According to the American Pyrotechnics Association, only one state bans all consumer fireworks, and that's Maine. Now, Illinois and Vermont, they allow only wire or wood stick sparklers and other novelty items like those snakes. I know for a fact that Illinois residents cross the border to neighboring states to pick up the powerful stuff for their own personal displays, despite whether there's local laws and regulations against that. Guess there's some, declaring of their independence in that action. But it's also lost tax revenue for Illinois. Now, I imagine people in Vermont follow that same path, giving their July 4th Independence Day fireworks tax dollars to neighboring states. Now, the rest of the country and Washington, D.C., they allow for all types of consumer fireworks permitted by federal regulations, but it's important to note state laws vary. Meanwhile, most states don't levy any excise tax on fireworks. You might just have the local or state sales tax, but nothing extra on items like fireworks. Those that do impose taxes, they impose between 2% excise tax all the way up to 12% excise tax. Which states are those? Well, Alaska and Texas, they charge 2% excise tax. Georgia and Indiana charge 5% excise tax. Michigan charges 6%. Alabama charges 8%. And then on the high end of the spectrum, West Virginia and Pennsylvania charge 12%. Now, in Pennsylvania, that 12% tax rate for consumer fireworks and the state sales tax of 6%, both are independent of each other. That means you're paying 18% for fireworks bought in Pennsylvania. The issue recently came up on the Pennsylvania House floor, where officials there discussed how those funds being collected off that excise tax are being used.
Regarding the fireworks tax, how efficacious has that been in terms of delegation of those assets? Are we comfortable with how they're being utilized?
So the fireworks tax funds both the municipal fire department capital grant program. It funds the training center capital grant program, the bomb squad reimbursement program, our fireworks safety advertising campaign, and it provides additional funding into the annual grant program for the EMS grants. So in my opinion, the tax revenue is very beneficial to our ability to put money into the field.
But Pennsylvania requires retailers to pay even more. They pay the highest retail fees, as much as $20,000. So if you are in Pennsylvania, you want to set up a fireworks stand, they're legal, but in order to have that stand, you've got to pay a non-refundable $2,500 application fee and an additional fee ranging from $7,500 all the way up to $20,000. And that depends on the square footage of the retail space. Now, the Tax Foundation says that high fees for retailers turns into hidden costs that consumers end up paying in the long run. But while you're lighting the fuse, thinking how much in taxes are going to blow up in the sky, don't forget about your safety and the safety of those around you. The Consumer Product Safety Commission reports in 2025, there were 1,300 sparkler injuries. Yes, that's right, sparklers, the only thing legal in the state of Illinois. There were 13,000 fireworks injuries across the country. 30% were between the age of 25 and 44, and even younger people, 15 to 24, 31% had injuries. And there were 15 deaths reported last year. Now, the CPSC does provide some tips to stay safe. Among them, never allow your children to play with or ignite fireworks, including sparklers. They burn real hot. Keep a bucket of water close by or a garden hose handy in case there's a fire or any other kind of mishap. Light fireworks one at a time, then move back quickly. And never try to relight or pick up fireworks that were not ignited fully. So when you're declaring your independence this Independence Day holiday, be safe. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the States. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. NASA awarded $590.4 million in new moon base lander contracts Tuesday, but the agency has not disclosed what its broader Moon to Mars program is going to cost taxpayers. The Center Square reporter Brett Rowland reports that it's a question NASA has not answered for more than a month. Administrator Jared Isaacman gave no total cost estimates at a May 26th briefing, despite direct questions from reporters. NASA has also not updated a $20 billion 7-year cost estimate Isaacman gave in March for building a lunar base. Now, that figure does not include the broader Moon to Mars program. NASA officials responded to a written question from the Center Square asking that figure by the June 25th deadline, but it didn't provide that estimate. The total mission's costs did not come up at Tuesday's briefing. Isaacman, he said, everyone from both sides of the aisle and beyond, they're looking to the moon for what's next.
We're on Moonbase Update 2 right now, so there's going to be a lot of Moonbase updates. We're doing this, monthly going forward. You have a national space policy that calls for building a moon base. The President of the United States wants to see a moon base. You have bipartisan support from Congress to build a moon base. We're going to be sending, crew and payload to the moon for a very, very long time. So if you're in the business of making hardware and you're continuing to think about how to improve that hardware, which you should do when you have a demand signal that goes from infrequent bespoke landers to let's do this all the time, you're probably making, worthwhile investments at this point. So there's going to be a lot more moon updates going forward.
Now, the agency's funding remains contested in Washington, D.C. The White House has proposed cutting NASA's budget 23% from $24.4 billion to just $18.8 billion, while the House has advanced legislation keeping funding flat. NASA's acting inspector general testified before Congress in January 2024 that the Artemis program alone was projected to exceed $93 billion through 2025. The agency has not said how much more the Moon to Mars program would add to that figure. Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser was projected to win the Democratic primary for governor after early results Tuesday, but the Republican primary for that same seat, it's too close to call. Meanwhile, the Attorney General primaries were determined by large margins. The Center Square contributor Liam Hibbert reports Weiser is expected to go up in the November 3rd election against whoever wins the Republican primary, and the winner will succeed Democratic Governor Jared Polis, who's termed out as Colorado's governor. While Scott Bottoms trailed in the Republican gubernatorial primary with 19.8% of votes, Victor Marks got 38.7%, and State Senator Barb Kirkmeyer 41.5%, remaining with 11,000 votes of each other out of a total of 385,000 counted votes Tuesday evening. Meanwhile, Republican incumbents won their primaries Tuesday for Colorado's 3rd, 5th, and 8th congressional districts. And for the 5th year in a row, Pennsylvania state leaders have failed to meet the June 30th deadline for passing a budget, a situation that the Center Square reporter Ford Turner reports will have little practical effect in the short term, but it raises the ugly specter of last year's 135-day impasse. Now, in 2025, even though political leaders spoke in late June and early July of being close to a deal, none had reached a deal until November of that year. Billions of dollars in state payments were withheld. Counties lost millions of dollars, and programs were cut with employees being furloughed. Now, chances of making the deadline this year ended before 3 p.m. Tuesday, with the Republican-controlled Senate concluding its day of voting with members intended to leave Harrisburg and head home for the long Independence Day holiday weekend, even though they would be on call for a hasty return. Now, the Democrat-controlled House, meanwhile, they stayed in Harrisburg and was scheduled to be in session today. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com.
That issue. And I wonder, I haven't gone back and looked at the story. I wonder if they've corrected their story. Huh. We're going to have to check that out. They should, given their policies on corrections. They are now on notice that what they wrote is false because she made it all up. Turns out there was no FaceTime because a reporter wisely made a request for the body cam footage.
That's Mike Florio of NFL on NBC, and that wise reporter he's talking about is the Center Square investigative reporter Adam Herbetz, who reported on a story the New York Times didn't fully verify. Now here's what happened. NFL insider Diana Rossini told an elaborate story to a podcaster about getting a warning after being pulled over after she shared with the officer a FaceTime call with an NFL coach, with that officer standing right there by the window. Now, the New York Times reported her story as is, as it was told on that podcast, but the Center Square obtained that body camera footage, and it turns out Rossini's story, not true. Now, while she did get pulled over for distracted driving, body camera footage the Center Square obtained shows Rossini fabricating part of that story. Here's what Florio recently wrote about this situation, quote, "It raises a few fair questions regarding the effort of the New York Times to investigate Rossini's journalism. First, Florio asks, why didn't the Times get the body camera footage before publishing the Rossini article? Adam Herbetz of the Center Square got it. The New York Times essentially got caught flat-footed." Now, the New York Times later did credit the Center Square for obtaining that body camera footage first, which seemingly disproved part of their story. But the Times says now it's a possibility that she got pulled over multiple times in that day, which Florio says is, quote, laughable. But that's what we do here at the Center Square. Fact-based reporting from original source material that matters to you in print, on video, day in and day out. And we'll bring it all to you here daily with the States. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and join us back here tomorrow to wrap up the week for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, around the country, only with the States, powered by the Center Square.